Hi guys, it's Beth and welcome back to my channel, and today I am doing my card share from the pumpkin spice pads that I have been using up in the month of August. And yes, this is pretty much what is left of the two pads that I have been working on. And so I have all of my cards here that I finished up the pad with, and then there is one more big project share or big project that I want to share with you, and then the pad's already wrapped up. I just need to get the videos made and posted for you. But with these cards, I decided to start with some of the 3x4 cut-aparts that were in the pad. So this particular one is Operation Right Home sketch number 29. And this was a cut apart. It just has like some different, like I probably could have even turned these into smaller cut aparts, but I didn't. I just left it as like a 3x4 journal card. And then this background, my card mat here, was one of the patterns in the pad. Is like a kind of an ombre, like a monochromatic ombre. So I just used that as my card mat because it was nice and solid. And then here again, this one I made my own cut apart, made my own journal card. These were the little labels that came in the pad, and again, there were 2 sheets of these label cut aparts in each pad. So I ended up with 4 sheets, and I want to say that there were at least 30 cut aparts per page. So I mean, do the math. That's 120 of these little labels that I had. And some of them were great for sentiments. Some of them were great for the other project, one of the other big projects that I did. But then some of them were just kind of random words that described fall that I really couldn't figure out how else to use. So I just would kind of group them together on the cards as best I could. So I grouped these together and turned them into a journal card. I used 2 scraps of this yellow paper kind of as my mat behind my journal card, and then there's a strip of pattern paper that's kind of covering the seam of where I put the 2 pieces of yellow together. And then this time I just used a solid brown cardstock for my mat. So on these I didn't necessarily use a sketch. I just took the cut apart and also cut kind of one of the more solid prints that were in the pad, and just kind of put that behind my journal card at an angle, just to kind of give it a little bit of color behind it and kind of frame it. And then I finished it off with it's the vintage Nouveau drops, and it's kind of like an off-white color. But I did 4 of these of the Hello Gorgeous. I love that sentiment. So there's 4 of those that are all the same. And then this was one, I think I cut it out of it was like I think a 3x4 cut apart, and I just did a die cut of the circle part out of it. So this is Sweet Sunday sketch number 262. And the sentiment says, leaves are falling, autumn is calling. And then I have 2 where I did the blue kind of ombre pattern in the background, and then a strip of paper going across. Then this one I just used a brown piece of cardstock with a gold strip. And I was playing with how I wanted to do this is that same vintage Nouveau drop color. I was just trying to figure out where I wanted to put those. Played with different placements. This is My Favorite Things sketch number 328. And this one I just used some pattern paper, and again backed it with some pattern paper for a mat, and then also used pattern paper for the actual card mat. So I used up a good bit of paper on this card, which was nice. That's kind of what I was trying to do. And this was one of those little label cut aparts. And then I did add 3 little vinyl circles up here just to kind of act as like enamel dots. Took me a while to think of that word. This one I did the same way, but it just uses some plain brown cardstock as my card mat, but I did use this pattern paper with the kind of rose gold foiling in it. For the main accent piece, backed it with the cream and rose gold polka dot, and then used another one of those little label cut aparts and trimmed it into like an arrow. These two are the same, no, they are exactly the same. Again, it used that blue ombre pattern in the background. This time I did use a brown cardstock as the matting for that rectangle element instead of another piece of pattern paper. But I did cut circles from another blue pattern. And then these are the two of the label cut aparts. This one I just turned it around because I didn't like what it said on the other side. I think it said bonding or gathering. I don't even remember what that one said, but it didn't really make sense. So I just turned it over and used it as an accent piece for Give Thanks. And then this one is Mojo Monday, sketch number 491. And this one I just took two pieces of the pattern paper and backed it with a piece of brown cardstock for my card mat. And then this Warm Autumn Wishes was a sentiment that I had printed from my silhouette last year and still had left. So decided to use it up since the colors coordinated. And there was another one of those as well. The next one is Reverse Confetti number 27. And here I just used two different pieces of scraps and kind of grouped them together. Happy Fall Y'all was a stamp that I had from one of the Flavor of the Month kits I used up that month as well. I just kept that stamp set out and used the Happy Fall Y'all in a couple different places. Okay, hopefully my dogs are done barking. Our neighbor is building a barn back by our house and is having gravel delivered today, and every time a gravel truck comes, my dogs go nuts. So anyway, this one I also added some little vinyl leaves that I had cut out of some scrap vinyl down here at the bottom. So this one is similar, just using different patterns, and then I stamped that on a slightly different, it was a different part of that ombre page, and then did 3 leaves down here. This one I used blue patterns and I covered the seam with the some rose gold washi tape, and then punched some little rose gold circles out of a scrap of the polka dot pattern here. I just went inside, found a couple spots where I could get the full circle and then just punched out the circle as an accent down here. And this time I used the sentiment Pumpkin Kisses and Fall Wishes, which I had also printed from my silhouette last fall. This is Mojo Monday, sketch number 361. And here I just matched up two different patterns that I could kind of get that were close to that size. And then this is not even a full strip. It's pieced together behind this blue wood grain pattern. And then Just Saying Hello came from an Easter stamp, actually. That was in a recent Flavor of the, or actually not, yeah, a recent Flavor of the Month kit from Scrapping for Less. And so I just stamped it on there's this kind of off-white pattern, and it was part of another page, and so I just kind of found some where there wasn't actually anything else going on, and it was just the off-white, and stamped on that to try and use that up. And then just use some cardstock from my stash to put behind it with a scallop circle. Same thing, I just kind of matched up the rose gold patterns here, that floral strip behind it, and again, it is not a full strip going across behind, it is pieced together. So if you are, trying to use up scraps, don't feel like you have to have, something that's going to go all the way across the card. If it's going behind something, you can always just kind of piece it together behind that top layer. This is Operation Right Home, sketch number 99. And this one I didn't follow too closely. I mainly just used the stripe that goes behind that rectangular, and then that rectangular element and the stripe that goes behind it. And then I added like sentiments down here instead of just a little square. So I think on all of these, I made a bunch of different variations of these, and I think I used cardstock as a mat on all of them, and then just changed up the pattern paper for the rectangle and then the pattern paper for the stripe. And then Happy Thanksgiving is a sentiment it's an old stamp set that I have. And then up here, I just used some more of those brown vinyl circles. This one I actually stamped on some of that yellow ombre pattern. I had some small scraps of that left. And so I just used a thank you stamp from my stash and then some more of the brown vinyl dots as accents. Fall greetings, that came from the same stamp set as the Happy Fall Y'all stamp. That was from Scrapping for Less. And then here I used some more of those brown vinyl leaves. This Happy Thanksgiving I think I actually printed from my silhouette at some point. And instead of any vinyl dots this time, I just used a flag from the same pattern that I made my strip that goes on the bottom part of the card. Here I used the other two give thanks little labels, and these are both the same. Use blue circles punched from some of this blue pattern paper here. And then this is the ombre pattern with that stripe that goes behind. So I was just trying to tie in the blue on the give thanks part. And then this last one, I used a leaf pattern and pulled it up into a little banner up here, and then thankful was a label cut apart that I had. So many label cut aparts. So here's some more of the label cut aparts. This was like, I just took this piece that I had cut out of the pattern paper. There were flowers, it was 12 by 12. And there were flowers in the bottom, like left corner, and the top right corner, and then it was just lines like across the rest of the page. And so I took the corners and tried to use this one as just my card mat. I liked the floral element, so I just decided to add two labels up here and just kind of let it go as that and leave the flowers kind of do their thing. So this one I just chose Harvest and Nature's Palette. This was also part of a 12 by 12 design. It had a saying down at like one of the bottom corners, and then like lined, almost like notebook style lined paper throughout the whole rest of the 12 by 12 page. So I just took that particular corner, cut it down, and wanted to use the change can be so beautiful kind of as my main sentiment. Backed it on some of that ombre paper, and then used one of the little labels up here, just says autumn, so you know kind of what kind of change it's referring to. This is another one of my favorite cards, excuse me. The cut apart that says so Foxy. And so I showed some of these earlier and they just kind of got separated, but I took some of the polka dot wood grain background as my card mat on all four of these, and then some kind of, I don't know what color you would call that, like a melon, peachy, but I just kind of did it the same size as my cut apart, but just kind of turned it so that it kind of frames it in a different way. But I did 4 of those. I love that sentiment, so Foxy, with the fox. So here are 3 others that are kind of a similar design, just different elements I use. So Fall Into a Good Time was a journal card size cut apart, and I took some blue. I don't even remember if this was a solid piece of blue or if I pieced it together, since I have this leaf strip going across here. I may have pieced it together to get that mat for my journal card, and then again just backed it on that polka dot wood grain for my mat. Here I kind of made my own little embellishment journal card, whatever, using a whole bunch of those labels. I just tried to find ones that I could group together either by subject or by color, and so these kind of all coordinated, but chilly, October, pumpkins, change, and crisp. and then backed them on white and kind of trimmed it around just to make it a little bit of a frame. And then I took, there's a leaf die cut that I had in one of the Scrapping for Less kits that I used up, the Flavor of the Month kits that I used up in August. There was a leaf die in one of them. And so I just, since I had that out, I used that and just used some of the scraps and cut some blue leaves to kind of add just a little bit more color around the rectangular element there. This one is same thing, except for this one has Fallen to a Good Time on there instead of Change, and I used kind of like the orangish brown rust colored leaves. This is Operation Ride Home sketch number 20. Again, just used up some scraps, those label cut aparts. I just tried to, these I grouped because they had the rose gold in them. So Crisp Season Harvest. And again, it looks like I took 2 pieces of scraps of kind of like that ombre paper and then covered the seam with some of the striped paper. And I ended up I had made all of these elements before I even started putting them onto cards. I just kind of took some cardstock, started grouping the labels together and would trim them down, and I think I even backed them. So then when I went to put them on cards, I just made sure to find, you know, colors that coordinated with what was in those little the embellishments that I made. This one does not have a name, but it does, SC355, duh. By the way, all of these will be linked in the description box below as per usual, but this one was a cut apart that didn't have like any writing on it. It was meant more for journaling. So I just took this Friends label cut apart and put it in the center there, and then just used several different pattern papers and then a strip of brown cardstock. I have several of these, and this one I can't read who it's from down here, but again, it will be linked below. Here again, I took 3 of the label cut aparts, grouped them together. This time it was on some of the ombre pattern paper, Fall, Gourds, and Chili. And this was an acorn that I had cut out of some brown scrap vinyl, so I just added it down there as that accent at the bottom. Autumn is Calling, Gourds, and Falling Leaves. This one I just used a leaf die cut, and then this was some more of that like lined notebook type paper, another scrap of that. This one I used Autumn, Falling Leaves, and Chili, and grouped 3 of the little vinyl leaves that I had down here. And again, you can see I kind of pieced together some of these like orange pattern scraps with another pattern paper to cover the seam. I'm all about piecing things together, apparently. My favorite things, sketch number 61. Just took two labels on this one, Colorful Leaves. And again, you can see I pieced 2 pieces together and added my little strip across, but then just found some colors that coordinated with what was in my labels here. And I used the polka dot because it kind of pulled in all the colors together, and then used the kind of aqua and then that gold as well. Operation Ride Home, sketch number 32. And these are pretty simple. Just use that polka dot wood grain as my background. I have a strip of this leaf pattern here. And then on this one, I was able to get a couple of like decent sized pieces of, it's like there's like a woven texture to it, but it was part of a busier pattern. I was just able to find some of like the more solid wood look or canvas look, whatever you want to call it, and use those to stamp some sentiments on to try and use those up. So happy fall, y'all. That was from the Scrapping for Less stamp set. I think it was called Teresa Talks Fall. And I made a whole bunch of this design. This is Operation Ride Home, sketch number 171. And at this point, if I could whenever I found a sketch that I thought would work, I made as many cards as I could from it. Because by this point, I was ready to be done. I was down to little scraps, and yeah. So in order to kind of be more efficient, I just, when I found something that would work for a size scrap I had, any scraps that were close, I just trimmed down and made it work. So here I have 2 of the rose gold polka dot with the aqua in the middle, and I decided to back it on that peach melon color just for kind of a contrast. And so I brought it in again here on one of my circles, my scallop circles. Thank you is just a stamp that I had on my desk that I was using for something else, so I decided to go ahead and use it here. And then I used some more of that rose gold washi down there at the bottom, just to balance out the metallic at the top. Here I just paired 2 different kind of brownish patterns together. I stamped some pumpkins on a scrap of the yellow goldish ombre paper, and then I decided to go ahead and kind of color them in with a little bit of orange and brown just to tie in with the brown paper here. And Fall Greetings is from the Scrapping for Less stamp set. This is the same thing, I just used 3 different patterns here. And I stamped my thank you on the back side of a label cut apart. Didn't really care about what the other side said. It wasn't something that went well with the card anyway. I don't even remember what it was. And just decided to stamp some sentiments on the back side of some of those instead of using some of my scrap paper. So here I used some more of those little vinyl circles in my stash. This one I pulled together because it had like the blues and then that melon color. So I kind of phased it over. You have the floral that has like all the colors, and then the plaid has kind of just the orange and the blue and the cream, and then it goes to the blue over on this side. And then I backed it with that melon peachy color, and then also did a scallop circle. So I think that one turned out pretty. This one I decided to fussy cut some of the flowers that I could actually get a whole flower out of one of the pattern scraps I had left, and just use all 3 of the same pattern stripes here. Stamped my sentiment and grouped some of the flowers over there. I feel like I needed another flower, but I couldn't get a whole one out. And then this is just another one of the peach ones that I've showed you before. So I got a whole bunch out of that particular card sketch, and this is the last pile, and this was scraps. So here I had like 4 of these pieces that were pretty much the same width and pretty much the same length, and there was just one that was a different pattern than the other. So I just grouped all of those together, took a strip of the ombre paper that I had left and put it all the way across the card just to kind of help hold it all together. Stamped the Happy Fall Y'all on some of the orange section of the yellow, gold, orange ombre paper, and then have 2 leaves die cut out of like that melon cardstock that I had that worked well with the paper. And I did actually pop this sentiment up. I think there's a couple pieces of cardstock behind it, so it's got a little bit of lift to it, but not much. Operation Right Home 203. And again, I got a whole bunch of these because I had a whole bunch of strips. A lot of these are what I made note cards out of, and so I had a whole bunch of the same size, long, thin strips. And so this one worked perfect. That sketch worked perfect for these. So I just took 3 strips and made the center one longer, fishtailed them all. And then here I had stamped the pumpkins on kind of that ombre color paper again. Did not color this one in this time. And backed it on a white scallop circle, and then stamped Fall Greetings on the back side of another label cut apart. Same thing here, except for this one. This was another label cut apart that was already fishtailed because that was the shape of the cut apart, and so I stamped on that one instead. Here I didn't have 3 of this blue at this point, but I had this one kind of same words, I think. but just a different pattern. So it still has the blue in there. So I just used that one in the center, stamped Happy Fall Y'all on the blue ombre paper scrap this time, and then couldn't figure out what I wanted to mat it with. So I just took a piece of that polka dot with the rose gold dots on it and put it behind just to pull out the rose gold a little bit more. So this is that, the same kind of blue words that I used on the last one. I did do a card mat on this one to pull out the blue a little bit. And back to my pumpkin on the blue, and then this was also a cut apart that you could journal on, so I just stamped my fall greetings right on top of it. And last one, I had 2 strips of the pumpkins left and just pulled in a piece of that kind of peachy melony cardstock for the center strip, backed it on a blue mat, and then this, I die cut some of the leaves out of the scraps from the polka dot wood grain, and just kind of grouped them together at the bottom. So since this was my sentiment, I just kind of created more of a decorative element at the bottom there. And wait for it, Operation Write Home sketch number 154, my favorite. Just grouped together, like literally, I just sat there, I'm like, okay, what scraps do I have that are about 1.5 inches wide? Went through and cut them into 1.5 inch squares, and then kind of figured out which combinations work best together and pieced these together pretty quickly. Here I had 3 of the rose gold polka dot left and pulled in a blue, that kind of like turquoisey blue. Brought in the rose gold down here, and I couldn't figure out what color to put my sentiment on. I have such a trouble matching creams. I don't know why, and I don't know why probably nobody else cares, but it drives me crazy because most of the cardstock you get, it's more of like a vanilla, like a darker cream, and then a lot of the patterns paper, it's a lighter cream, like more of a linen. I don't know the specific color breakdown, whatever, but I have cardstock that will match it, but it's textured, so I can't stamp on it. So I don't know, I always struggle with that. And so I just went with craft on this one, since that's what my card base was. And that's what most of my card bases for this round of cards was, craft. I did pull in white where I could, just because I have more white cardstock than I do the craft. So I was trying to save my craft a little bit. So on this one, I had a thank you that was already printed out on craft cardstock, so just decided to go with that. So this one I had 4 different patterns, and this was just a plain wood grain, and so I added a leaf to it just to give it a little bit of something. And then I have Warm Autumn Wishes backed on the same brown that I have, that the leaf was die cut out of, and then what the square behind the little squares was from, and then just picked strip that matched one of the squares in my grouping up here. So just added that on the bottom. This one I had like 2 matching, so there's 2 different sets. This is actually the same paper, it's just from different parts of it. And so I just added a leaf that kind of coordinated with the turquoise color, and then it's also what I stamped my sentiment on there. This one I had, 3 of the plaid, and then just pulled in, it's like a wood grain pattern behind some flowers, and so the colors match the plaid. So just used those together, and then I had 1 pumpkin that I had already stamped, and so I just kind of fussy cut out around it and added it to that orange pumpkin-y melon colored cardstock. And my last one is S&S sketch number 6 by Velda S. And so it just used 1 3/4 inch strips. And so again, I just went through, figured out what was wide enough to be 1 3/4, cut all my pieces down, and then just grouped them together. So here I had 2 that were the gold color, and then 2 random ones. And so I offset the gold and the random one. And then, see, this is and you probably can't tell on camera, it doesn't look as bad, but this is like a darker cream than this, but it was already, I already had a sentiment printed on there, so I decided to go with it. And then here I actually had 2 different coordinating sets and backed everything on the blue. And that was that. So I ended up getting 63 cards with this round. And that used up a lot of, well, it used up all the rest of the labels, whether I had to turn them over and stamp on the back side or use them, you know, as what they were. But I did get all of those used up. And then whatever scraps I had left after that went on to the insides of the cards. And then I used them to finish off the other project that I have yet to show you. So there are 2 more videos. Today I'm filming this on September 1st. The pad is done. All the projects are done. I have this video, 1 more project share, and then the wrap up. So those will kind of roll out here into September, but otherwise this pad was done and I am moving on to Halloween next. So something I will try to work in to one of my videos is showing you guys how I get the sentiments from my silhouette. I know I've had questions on in the past, and I haven't really had to do it for any of the pad projects that I've done recently, but I will need to do it for Halloween because I don't have a whole lot of Halloween stamps. So I figured that would be a good time to kind of show you guys how I do it and get those printed out at the same time. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for the final videos of the pumpkin spice pad. But if you guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe so you can stay tuned for the last few projects and then to see what all I got out of these 2 pads. I noticed that I wrote down that I started with 57 full sheets out of those 2 pads. But I feel like I got a lot out of those 57 sheets. So stay tuned for that to come. But I thank you guys so much for your time today. And as always, I hope you're having a very crafty day.